All right. Hey, 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 everybody. Happy Make Your Move Monday. This is Latrice McFadden coming to you live all the way from Durham, North Carolina. And I have a special guest on with me today, Mrs. Yvette Carpenter with Truist Bank. And we are going to be talking just briefly about this 50-year mortgage and all the buzz around it. So, Yvette, I appreciate you joining me today, especially with short notice. um, so
It's my
I have been a
pleasure, as always.
thank you. I have actually, when I saw this 50-year mortgage, I was like, ooh, because I am my been doing this since 1997, and I have had one 40-year mortgage. So that's something that I had actually asked several lenders about the possibility of doing a 40-year mortgage to make it a little bit more affordable until I don't know when, but and everybody's like, yeah, no 40-year mortgages, nobody's going to buy those, nobody has interest in them. And then here we come out with this possibility of a 50-year mortgage, which I was like, wait a minute, that's like a whole life. So I wanted
Yeah.
to see if
Mhm.
we could just talk a little bit about that. But before we get started, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got in this industry, how long you've been doing this, and things like that?
Sure, sure. So again, my name is Yvette Carpenter. I have been at Truist for about 10 years, a little bit over 10 years, but I've actually been in the mortgage industry for about 30 years. So of course, I'm dating myself here, and originating primarily the last maybe 25, 26 years of my career. And yeah, the 50-year mortgage buzz is it's all the rage now. That's all you can find on a lot of websites right now. And, um, you know, honestly, at this point, from a lending perspective, it's talking points, but I think you really have to just peel back that onion to really see how beneficial, or if it's beneficial at all, um,
Mhm.
and to try to do a level set on that, because it is not uh, the it is not what the media is intending to say in terms of the benefits. So I'm not in favor. I'm not a fan of the
Okay.
50-year mortgage.
So let's talk a little bit about the most common mortgage is a 30-year mortgage, whether it's fixed or, and for the sake of this, let's just focus on fixed versus adjustable rate mortgages. Can you tell us a little
Hmm.
bit how
Hmm.
that works? It's a 30-year mortgage and talk about a little bit about the amortization and things like that so people will understand what the most common mortgage is.
Yeah, so the most common mortgage, of course, again, is going to be your 30-year mortgage, which means the principal will be spread out over a 30-year term. Primarily when you close on a home, whether you do a 10-year or 15 or even a 30-year loan, you will essentially pay more interest upfront in the very beginning. And as you make those payments over the course of time, eventually the principal will reduce. Therefore, your interest that you're paying on that loan will also be reduced. So, if you make all of your, 360 payments, then eventually at that 30-year mark, then you will be the rightful owner of that home, and you will have paid that mortgage off in full, which means that you will be pretty much mortgage free.
Hmm. Hmm.
And that's the goal, is to try to, you know, when you're early in your career, the goal is to try to be debt free as much as you can, so that when you go to retire, that you don't have a mortgage, and you'll be able to stay in the home basically without mortgage, and be able to retire and have a comfortable retirement.
Hmm. Hmm. Right, exactly. And so when we go to closing, I know every attorney that I go, they always just throw that little amortization schedule out to you, and you see with a 30-year mortgage, you really are paying multiple times for that home, and it will obviously adjust depending on the interest rate. So
Mhm.
we're looking at a 50-year mortgage, how does that compare? What does that look like?
Well, one of the things that we always have to look and see why the 50-year mortgage is being floated around is to address this level of affordability for clients
Mhm,
with the price of housing increasing, with rates increasing. They're looking for ways to try to help, more people get into homes. However, the biggest drawback that I can see to the 50-year mortgage is your level of equity that you can accumulate in that home is it becomes lowered. So you will have less equity in the home. You will end up paying the banks more in interest, almost doubling the interest cost of the home. So therefore, where people they've been able to use their equity, to fund, say their children's college educations, or maybe fund home improvements. If you have less equity, or because you're building less equity in that home, you won't have access to those funds. And we all know, especially primarily in our communities of color, the our equity in our home has pretty much been how we've been able to generate wealth. And if you take away the fact that you will not be generating that type of equity, then really you're building equity at a much, much slower pace. And pretty much, your money is going to the bank
mhm,
primarily
mhm.
instead of going towards bringing the principal down.
Right, exactly.
Which
So,
that's one of the biggest things yeah.
right. So with that, and like you said, real estate is a key wealth building tool, and a lot of times it's really a forced savings plan for us in our community when we're buying a home because
Mhm, mhm.
the goal is to pay down the debt and also for the value of the home to increase over the years for you to be able to access that equity. But if you have spread it over 50 years, like for example, if you when you first get your mortgage, and I'm just bringing these numbers up, I don't have anything right in front of me, but like if your mortgage is $2,000, majority of that, the first, what, 7 or 8 years is going to just pay interest. You're not even really building any equity unless the value is increasing. So if you are stretching it out over 50 years, at what point do you start really building any equity in that? Have you seen a sample amortization schedule, or do you know, like comparing it from 30 years to 50 years, when you would even start really paying more than
I
$10
have not,
towards your
yeah,
home?
yeah, I have not seen an amortization schedule, but I would imagine, I mean, if you're talking a 50-year mortgage, and by the time you get to half, that's probably where you may see some of your principal coming down. But by that point, you've already been in the house almost 25 years, and you have another 25 to go. And it's just very marginal benefit to to the client, and overall you end up paying 3 or 4 times more for the house than what you would if you had taken a 30-year. um,
Mm,
it is to me, it's not the answer to address the affordability issue, um,
mhm,
simply because it will you'll just be in debt longer.
mhm.
That's
So
all. You'll just be in debt a lot longer.
a lot longer and not really have, so somebody says, um I have two questions in one. So one question is, why is it that they're floating the 50-year to show to say that you might be able to afford more? How does it lower your payments? It lowers your payments so that you can fit in that debt to income ratio qualification amount. But some of the examples I've seen, it hasn't been a significant savings even on the monthly.
It's not. Yeah, it's not, because if you look at where interest rates are and you look at what the cost of housing is, the impact is very minimal to the monthly payment.
Mhm.
And the other thing that I would also add is that in most instances, if you get a 50-year mortgage, a lot of times, you will base your household uh, and your ability to repay based on that 50-year payment. So the likelihood of you maybe making extra payments to
Mhm.
help pay that off sooner
Mhm.
will be less. So typically, I always tell my clients, make one extra payment a year and you'll cut 7 years off of your loan. But guess what? You would almost have to make 3 or 4 extra payments a year to even put in a dent, to having to pay interest over a 50-year period of time. And it most people are not that disciplined in order to be able to do that, because guess what? You're raising children. People have AAU basketball games. You're trying to, you've got volleyball um, tournaments and things like that. And so most people will set their lifestyle around that monthly payment, and they're just concerned with living rather than
Mhm.
concerned that you look up now 25 years later, you have the same payment and we're close to paying this loan off.
Right.
So
Exactly.
there's
Go ahead. Go ahead. What were you gonna say?
there is and honestly, when you think about a 50-year, you just the likelihood of you being able to pay that off in your lifetime just will not be great. If you think about that, the average first time home buyer right now is 40, because that is also out there that's being floated in the news. I became a first time home buyer when I was 26, 27. Okay,
Mhm.
if the average first time home buyer now is 40 and it's going to take you 50 years to pay this house off, then you could be 90 at that point. And at that time, you may not even need the house at that point. So it's
Right.
it's just not something that I would encourage anybody to do.
So what about the person who says, "Well, I need to get into a house. I'm going to only be there for 5 years or 7 years. So it doesn't matter that it's a 50-year mortgage." What would you say to that person?
Um, I would probably say that you may take that mortgage in the short term, but at some point in time, you would really need to look to refinance that mortgage out of a 50-year term. As your income increases, then maybe you need to revisit being able to look and try to refinance to a shorter term, because part of me being a loan officer is really being able to tell someone how to be a good steward over their money, and just you know just feeding. Banks are incentivized, they want your interest because that's how they win. And you,
Mhm.
as a informed buyer, and we as real estate professionals, we have to coach our clients on how to be a well-informed and a good steward over their money as well. So
Mhm.
that may work in an interim period of time just to get you into the home, but just because you're there does not mean you have to stay there.
Mhm. Mhm.
I
And
would
I would
probably not tell any of my clients to do that.
Right. And I would almost say, too, from the real estate perspective, yeah, you may have this plan to move in 5 years and sell it in 5 years. But if you have paid zero, near zero towards the principal, you're not going to,
Right.
and depending on how the appreciation is, where the economy is, you're not putting yourself in a good position to be able to afford to sell your home. So, and thinking about that
That's exactly
perspective,
right.
if
And
you're
you don't
not
know
building
what the market is going to be. You don't even know
exactly.
what the market is going to be
Right, right, exactly. So I always tell people
in
when
5
you
years.
in 5 years, in a year, or whatever time period, if you have not cut down on that interest, or and you paid $300,000 for this home, and literally you may have paid $1,000 towards the principal in 5 years or whatever, because it's so little, and the market hasn't appreciated, or we're going through a period like we are now, then you may not be able to afford to sell your home. You may have to do
Correct.
a sale or a foreclosure or something, or be stuck with it with this payment. So we can, like you said, just encouraging people to really think about things and be good stewards over their money. Any other thoughts on
Mhm.
that part of it from the real estate perspective, the real estate side of it, realtor side of it?
Yeah, because if you think about it and you think about, typically if we happen to be in a pretty decent market, where, homes are, we're not in Florida where there's a condo, crisis and, there's just a crazy amount of inventory that's out there and people are really having to lower the price of their homes just to unload them. But we are also in a market where we find that homes are sitting on the market longer. Sellers are having to be much more strategic. They're having to offer more incentives. They're having to maybe pay a seller funded buy down, closing costs. So you will not have the room to make those types of decisions if you haven't built the equity to be able to do that.
Right.
And much less the other thing, you and I both work in a space where we work with a lot of first time home buyers. So even more importantly, these down payment assistance programs will most likely not consider a 50-year mortgage. You know,
Hmm.
they will not consider, most likely, because one, those those loans pretty much are not sellable on the secondary market. So you will probably only get a 30-year amortization, especially in that first time home buyer space. Um,
Hmm.
so from the real estate perspective, I would not say that it would be a good move at all because your equity will it will not grow the way you want it to grow to be able to make those savvy business decisions to say, okay, is this the good time to sell? Am I being transferred to my job? Am I upside down? With being able to sell. So that the 50-year mortgage would not be a good vehicle, financing vehicle to be able to do that with.
Right. I wasn't even thinking about the fact that things happen. And what if you get a new job, like you said, and you absolutely have to sell? What if something happens and
Hmm.
you need to
Hmm.
change to a different type of home, go from a two-level home to a one-level home? So there's so
Exactly.
many things to take into consideration. And so we always want to position our clients in the best situation so that when life happens, um, that they'll be prepared as best they can. And, we can't prepare for everything, but we definitely never want to put
Hmm.
anybody in a negative situation. I know I tell a lot of my clients that are married to buy on one income if you can. It's getting more and more, oops, we lost Yvette. It's getting more and more difficult to do that. Oh, she's back. Getting more and more difficult to do that. But if you can buy on one income so that you're not house poor if someone loses their job. Can you hear me, Yvette? Are you back? No,
Yes,
maybe.
I'm here.
Okay. So I was just talking about how I always, encourage my clients, if it's possible, if it's a couple, if they're married, and I always tell people if you're not married, which this may have to change, but I try to discourage people from, if you're not married, from buying a house together. But if you are and you are able to buy on one income so that you are positioning yourself again for being able to maintain this mortgage if something happens to one person's income. And then, being able to deal with all the things that come along with home ownership, because it's an investment, but it's also a responsibility, right?
Oh, of course. The biggest thing too is that look at what we've seen with respect to taxes, in
Right.
the last 2 or 3 years, and the fact that the insurance, they want an increased rate for homeowners insurance of 68%, which, there's pushback on that, but it has become, you know, the expenses for homeownership have become higher, and typically you base your lifestyle on that. So very little room to pay maybe extra principal towards that mortgage unless you have some discretionary income, or you have a spouse who is not on the mortgage. So incredibly important to make those business savvy moves up front so that you don't have to pay in the end.
Hmm. Hmm. Absolutely, absolutely. So, any other comments or advice to somebody that is kind of on the fence with whatever is going on in our crazy world right now for buying or selling? What would you say to anybody that's thinking about buying or selling? other than avoid this 50-year mortgage? We lost her again. I think her phone may be ringing, but we will see. Um, there you go. You're back.
Yeah,
Okay, you're
yeah.
back.
In terms of buying,
hmm Buying, or yeah, let's start with buying and
yeah.
then selling. Somebody's,
So yeah. So in terms of buying, I would say in really look at your monthly debts that you have. There's a lot of changes that are going on, even as it relates to student loans, as it relates to there's credit is tightening. And so I would really say start early and really look at any debts that you could get rid of, try to reduce your debts as much as possible. Because even with student loans, there's really only going to be two payment plans now, so the zero payment plans are pretty much going away. So you really have to just be much more thoughtful about your price range, be more realistic about your price range, and then look at those areas and ways where you can eliminate debt, which will help you to, once you get in your home, then you're able to kind of navigate maybe an increase in taxes or an increase in insurance, so that you'll still be able to stay in the house and not kind of um, let the expenses kind of affect your monthly budget. And then in terms of selling, I would say, you know listen to your agent in terms of the price range. Be realistic with respect to what the market is bearing. I do speak with a lot of realtors, and sometimes the reason that homes are sitting on the market longer is because clients tend to think we're still in a COVID area market, rather than the market that we're truly dealing with right
Mhm.
now. And the frustration level of you letting your house sit on the market 3, 4, or 5 months and not getting an offer. It's generally not the realtor's fault because they have spoke to you about how to price your home. It's just the fact that sometimes clients dig their heels in and think, oh, I got to have this amount, when that's really not what the market is bearing. So those would be my takeaways from that.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I appreciate you joining me again. I just wanted to get on this 50-year mortgage. Like I said, I have been one who's talked about a 40-year mortgage. I don't know how we skip from 30 to 50. And 40 isn't ideal, but I think it's better than a 50. And maybe we
Uh-huh.
can, I know it helped at least one of my clients to get into, and she's still in her home all these
Mhm.
years later. I don't know if she ever refinanced, but I know that that was able to help her get into her home, the one that she wanted, just a little above the budget that she was pre-approved for at a 30-year mortgage. But 50 years, yeah, that's, I'm like, if you bought, like you said, the average age now is 40, but even if you bought at 20, you're talking about 70 years old and you're
70.
making mortgage payments. And if you
Right, right.
didn't, it's not even a savvy, because we talk a lot of times about, younger people buying and, before you get married and have children and all of that, and kind of house hacking. But if you got a 50-year mortgage, that's not going to help you house hack at all, because you're not
It
going to
is
be.
not. No, it is not. It is not. And we just have to not feed into what's not good for us. What is not good for us. If it doesn't sound like it would be good for you, then you don't do it. Maybe just be realistic about your current price range on the 30-year, rather than trying to force yourself into a 50-year mortgage, and it's not a good financial decision for you. So just being realistic with where you are in your price range will ultimately end up help you create wealth a lot sooner than trying to get into, you know, uh, a program or product that ultimately you won't win with.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Well, I appreciate you joining me again this Monday to talk about the 50-year mortgage. If anybody has any questions about it, how can they reach you, Yvette?
They can reach me. My cell number is 919-306-5945. And of course, I'm at Truist. My office is right at 4011 University Drive. And I'm open, for phone calls or just to be able to have a chat, with respect to what's best, in the long run.
Okay. All right. And then maybe we can come back another day and have a conversation on what's available with down payment assistance. Because I know that a lot of the programs are struggling with I don't know if things have come back since
Hmm.
open, but that's a conversation for another day. But we do always want to make sure. I know you and I both have a passion for first time home buyers, and like you said, a lot of times they do need
Yeah.
some down payment assistance to get started. And we had a lot of it. I don't know where things are, so we can come back another day and talk about that if you don't mind.
Yeah. Of course, a lot of uncertainty out there. A lot of times, people don't know anything right now at this point. We don't know what 2026 brings, but as soon as I know, I'll be glad to share that information. So definitely we can come back and revisit that.
All right. Well, I look forward to having you back. We'll say in January, maybe sometime, and figure out what's going
Yeah,
on.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Everybody, enjoy the rest of your Monday and remember to make your move because every step counts. And we will see you next Monday. Thank you, Yvette.
You're so welcome. My pleasure.